We're delighted to start this morning's lecture programme with Roger Patterson, who's going to speak on beekeeping, challenge what you're told, and this lecture has kindly been sponsored by West Sussex Beekeepers Association.
If I'm a problem, just shout out. Yeah, Dave Cushman left me the website in his will, and I just keep it going. And what we've always tried to make sure is there's good sound advice on there, not some of the fluffy stuff that's around at the moment. And I'm the author of 5 books. Now in beekeeping, there are 2 well-known sayings. Also, I'm going to give you the answers, a bit like the sort of answer song thing. Bees don't read the books. Well, they don't actually write them, which is the main problem. And the other one, of course, is ask X number of beekeepers a question, and you get Y number of answers. Well, I'd ask the question, why ask X number of beekeepers in the first place? Don't you trust the first one? If not, why ask them anyway? So we've all heard those, I'm sure we have, and it's strange that the people who say these things seem to think they're the first people that have ever said it. But you keep bees 62 years, or nearly 62 years like me, and I can tell you it can get a little bit sort of tiresome. I'm suggesting that all beekeepers challenge what they're told, even if I'm telling you, yes, you don't have to do it openly, but perhaps if you go to a meeting or something like that and you hear something, just think about it on the way home as to whether it might be suitable or not. So why should we challenge what we're told? Well, we have new discoveries all the time, and the one issue with the scientific information is that it doesn't always get out to beekeepers perhaps as quickly as it should do. It very often gets out, not quite through the back door, but through sort of minor channels. And of course, the new discoveries are superseding what we already thought. And there's quite a lot of that in beekeeping. There's loads of myths, misinformation, call it fallacies if you like, perhaps poor and inappropriate advice. Simple sort of thing is that what they do, perhaps in California or Kentucky, isn't what they do or isn't appropriate for your area. There's also false logic too, continually humanising bees. I think you've got to think almost like a bee, or a colony of bees rather than a human, from a human perspective. Also these days there are a lot of inexperienced beekeepers, so you get inexperienced teachers, demonstrators, mentors, writers, who simply just sort of copy and paste what somebody else has done. So if there is a mistake, they keep the mistake going. Some of them, if you notice quite carefully, they're just sort of rearranging the words, which perhaps gives a little bit of a different slant or something, and somebody copies that, and that's where it goes. Of course, the internet isn't all what it could be. There's some very good information on the internet, but there's also some which is, let's say, perhaps inappropriate. There are various forums, and it's well known that certain people get on there really just to push their particular views. Various websites, and have a look at some of those, and you'll see some absolute howlers. YouTube videos, of course. In the old days, if somebody started beekeeping, the first thing they did was try and write a book on it. Now, of course, they put up a YouTube channel. That then results in what I call the pack mentality, because people love to get together, and if somebody says something or does something that one of their leaders doesn't particularly like, they all sort of pitch in, even if it's not that bad. Also, I'm afraid these days there's quite a lot of intolerance. Need to ask yourself if what you're told is correct. Well, it might be correct in some circumstances, but perhaps not in others. So I'd change that to reliable. Is it reliable? And again, it may well be in one season and perhaps not in another. Now that may depend on the location, because if perhaps you're keeping bees in a very marginal area in the Welsh Hills, you might have different perhaps management techniques than if you're in a good area for foraging, good area for bees. The climate, perhaps the time of year, because you may have a situation, let's say end of April, and you'll do something to your bees, some sort of a technique, which you wouldn't do in August, for whatever reason. So you need to take these things into account. Also types of bee as well. Some are very much more prolific than others. And when I say prolific, the queens lay a lot more eggs, they need more space, all sorts of things like that. And also, if the question gives all the information. Now, one of the things I do, if somebody asks me a question, I generally ask other questions to try and find out why the person or the colony has got into that situation in the first place. And very often I find it's not quite as it's explained. But some people will just give the answer and that's it. So be aware of that, which of course is where experience and knowledge comes in of the questioner and the answer as well. Of course, prejudice, we've got quite a lot of that in beekeeping. Misinterpretation. I try to, if somebody sends me an email about a problem, I try to get them to send a photograph because very often the situation is different than what's been described. Terminology's changed, and I'll cover that a little bit later on, but we had a vast influx of beekeepers 15, 20 years ago, and some of the old terms have either been misused or perhaps overtaken by other terms. I'm afraid being a practical beekeeper, I think there's quite a lot of beekeeping by numbers. I'll call it robotic beekeeping, learning by rote or whatever, and perhaps what you do in one area may not be suitable for another one, such as get your supers on by the third week in April or whatever. Some places, they're still struggling to put them on in early June. Historical information, very often superseded by later discoveries, but the original is still available. And this is absolutely typical of something which keeps coming up and up and up and up and up. And it was shown in the early 1960s that the Isle of Wight disease wasn't caused by acarine. But we still get people talking about acarine causing the Isle of Wight disease. And I was online in the last week and they were saying that the Isle of Wight disease was acarine, but it wasn't. So they're the sort of things that need to be dealt with by beekeepers. The further you go back, the more people had reasons to promote one thing or another, or perhaps discredit it. That doesn't happen quite so much now, but certainly before the Second World War, have a look at older magazines and things like that, and you'll find that it's often the case. Not to worry, help is here, because there's a book recently been published, and you guess who's done it? And I'm not here to sell books because I haven't got any, but you may find them on the Northern Bee Book stand, or perhaps stalls. You may find them on the Bibber stand, but anyway, yeah, that's a bit of fun perhaps. It does cover many of the points that I've come across as a beekeeper. I've heard other people say, not perhaps just once, but on several occasions. It used to be a talk, which is a sort of forerunner of this one I'm giving you now, and I've done it, I suppose, about 20 years or so, and then some bright spark said, well, why don't you write it down? It'll only be an A4 sheet, won't it? So, of course, the A4 sheet very soon became a booklet, and it then ended up 100,000 words plus, and I've still got other things that I could and should have put in, but nobody wants a wheelbarrow to go with the book to carry it around. What I haven't done is rubbish anything, because I think that's the wrong thing to do in beekeeping. Perhaps just offer an alternative and discuss things and give reasons for it, rather than that is fact, when perhaps it may not always be fact. What I also try to do is give photographic evidence as well, because I think that's quite important if it's not misinterpreted. So I'm going to give you a small selection here, the sort of things that most of you people may have heard, and perhaps once you've been in beekeeping a year or two, you realise, hang on, my bees don't do that. But before then, in order to challenge something, you really need to know the basics. And when I say the basics, I mean the things that are absolutely factual, like life cycles, what's happening in a colony when it swarms, disease recognition, all those sort of things. And my view is all those things should be taught in the first year of beekeeping anyway. Once you know those, you can then work out if what you're told is reliable. But please, please, please don't believe me just because I tell you something. Please just go away and think about it. Is it feasible? Is it going to work with my bees? So try for yourself. Ask the bees. The best teachers of bees and beekeeping have got 6 legs and they've got 4 wings. They haven't got 2 legs and stand in front of an audience. Try a few experiments. Now, I don't know if there's any scientists here or not. Yeah, I think I'll see one at the back there. If there were, they'd probably have a little bit of a chuckle at the way I approach things. I'm basically an engineer, but I think I've got enough gumption to work out how to do simple experiments. So I think you need a reasonable sample size. It's no good just having one colony, but if you've got 3 or 4, I think you could be into a much different situation. Try and have some control if it's necessary, and above all, discipline, because if you need to do something, let's say on a Wednesday afternoon, don't do it on Thursday afternoon, because you're going to be a day out, and then you may well get the wrong results. What I've found when I do experiments is I very often get different results. But if you talk to scientists, they'll very often tell you that some of their own work is difficult to repeat. So you need to be just a little bit careful. Don't just do something on one colony once and then assume that all bees will always do that, because they probably won't. If at the end of the day it all goes wrong, please, please, please don't blame the bees. It's not their fault, it's yours. Every one of you, okay? What we are dealing with bees is biology, and we must understand that. It's not a mechanical thing, and biology is actually quite variable for various reasons. It could be nutrition or perhaps temperature, all sorts of things like that. Could be as a result of pests, pathogens, all sorts of things. What I do know is if you've got 2 colonies in the same apiary at the same time and they're side by side and they're in the same condition, if you treat them both the same, you go back a week or 2 weeks later and they both behave differently. You cannot say that bees do this, bees do that, bees do something else, because they may do, but very often they won't. Some of this stuff, I'm afraid, has got into mainstream thinking and teaching, which I think is a pity, because in some instances, people are perhaps passing and failing exams, not based on fact, if you get what I mean. Now I'm going to give you a few examples, but before then, another slight commercial. I think some of you have come across Live at the Hive, which is simply me at the bottom of my garden being live streamed. and I just go to a colony and I handle it. I probably haven't looked at it for a week or two beforehand, so I don't necessarily know what's in there. I know what should be in there, but anybody who's watched the life of the hive will very often find that I come across things that are unexpected. Now it's good because it really replicates what ordinary beekeepers find when they go to their own hive. So I very often find things that, let's say, I shouldn't really find. So let's get on to one or two things. This is the old classic. If you leave queen cells, leave two queen cells. Why? You all know the answer, don't you? It's insurance in case one is dud. Now, I see more heads going like that than I do like that. Obviously quite experienced beekeepers. Yeah, but that's what we're told, isn't it? In insurance in case one's dud. But what happens? We all know, don't we? If the colony's in the right condition, it's likely to swarm on the first queen cell to emerge, even if the second one is dud. Right, because in my experience, it takes anywhere between about 5 and 7 days for bees to discover that a queen cell is dud. I don't know the mechanism, whether it's pheromones coming through the cell wall or not, I don't know. Somebody else who's much brighter than me will be able to say, so that's probably all of it. But even if one is dud. So what happens is we introduce somebody else to beekeeping who probably didn't realise that a chimney is taken as a home by your swarm. So they could actually be yours. So if you either leave 2 queen cells or you teach people to leave 2 queen cells, make sure you get on the swarm list. And next time there's a swarm in somebody's chimney within half a mile of you, you go and sort it out. Okay? You all with me? So, look at that queen cell. Do you think it's good? You're all on the defensive now, aren't you? Because you know I've got something up my sleeve. Is that one good? Okay, that could be one you leave. So would you leave it? Many would. Actually, I don't think an experienced beekeeper would. Because if you look at that, it don't look right. Don't look right. Now, it takes several days for it to detect a dud. And when I opened it, that's what was inside. So a dead queen. So the swarm could have gone with a good virgin queen and left that colony absolutely queenless. So there's no benefit really in leaving 2 queen cells, in my view. Right, we're told that queen cells should be dimpled. The smooth ones, don't use them because they're bad. Right, have a look at them. Have a look at queen cells. As soon as they're sealed, they're not dimpled, the bees seem to work on them over several days, perhaps 3 or 4, and that's when the dimpling gets put on after sealing. So it's really just a case that the one on the left-hand side is probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 days older than the one on the right. That's all. That's all. There are 4 that are unsealed, and look at them, there's no dimpling on them. So they're probably a day off sealing, and they will stay like that perhaps for another day, and then the bees will put the dimpling on. In fact, I think you could probably see the little white bits of wax here, they started to do it. But notice they've done it towards the top. This is all observation. You don't need to go to books for it, and books probably won't even tell you. Just do it yourself. Instead of doing what most people, well, so some people do, gawk, wow, isn't that wonderful? Actually have a look, see what the bees are doing. Tell you an awful lot. Colony of bees, every time you open it, is telling you something. Bees will only swarm on swarm cells. we're told that they won't swarm on supersedure or emergency cells. Mine do, and they've done for a long time as well. If they do, try it, just give it a go. Give it a go and see what happens. In my experience, bees are likely to swarm with you leaving behind any sort of queen cell. It doesn't matter if the colony's in the right condition, the right time of year, the weather's good and that sort of thing, even though they didn't intend to swarm in the first place, but something's happened in between, out they'll go. Sorry, but that's my experience. Where queen cells are on the frame, you all know where they should be, don't they? The swarm on the bottom, some people say around the sides. Supersedure on the face. Well, they often are, but it's actually unreliable because they can be anywhere. There's 5 on the face of that comb, 5 swarm cells, 5 queen cells in the colony have got to be swarm. They won't be supersedure because you're very rare. Well, I don't think I've ever known more than 3 in a supersedure situation. Where are they? They're on the face of the comb. Okay, and there are 4 queen cells there, all on the face of a pretty grubby comb, grim comb, but they're on the face of the comb, not round the outside. There's also some cups there, queen cell cups, that they would probably use if they had a need to. Now here's supersedure ones, and I don't know supersedure because I remember the colony. They're right on the bottom of the comb where you'd expect, or where you told swarm cells should be, but there's only 2 of them. And if you, if you look at them, they're both at the same age. They're both about to emerge, close together, got to be supersedure cells. This was a supersedure cell, the only one in a colony. Where is it? Right up against the side of the frame. And actually the colony, I only noticed it because the colony swarmed on that. I'd checked the colony out a day or 2 earlier, had a clipped queen, and, no, sorry, a bit earlier than that, week earlier or so, had a clipped queen, and all of a sudden the swarm came out, and I went through the colony and found that. In wild comb, free living colony, the points of cells are always at the top. Well, there's a colony I took out of a barn probably 3 years ago, I think. Look close at that, blow it up. Look, they're all over the place, all over the place. So all this business about you must get the foundation around the right way and all sorts of stuff like that, the bees don't give monkeys. They really don't care. Propolis. We've been told for ages not to raise queens from colonies that heavy propolisers. Well, I've been involved with a lot of free living colonies, and I can tell you most of those absolutely plaster the inside of the cavity with propolis. When I started keeping bees, very few people did spring cleaning. Quite honestly, there wasn't much need to, because all they did was slap 3, 4 supers on at the beginning of the season, take them off at the end of the season, and they didn't handle the colonies very much in between. So there wasn't the pressure to do spring cleaning that there is now to make it easier to handle. As a result of that, within reason, I've never flamed my boxes. But of course, we now know that propolis is antibacterial, antifungal, anti-everything else, and the bees are really putting a shield around, some people call it an envelope, which is effectively self-medication. Now, I'll just ask the question, does flaming then destroy what the bees are trying to do naturally? I'm not saying you shouldn't flame. All I'm saying is that I never have, because I felt there was no need to. and I don't want to get in the argument of what we should be or shouldn't be doing. If you want to flame, flame. But I'm just questioning the value of it. This is a colony in a wooden building that I removed. Can I go back? Yeah, you'll see there's plywood in the back there, and there were some boards on the front that covered all this up. When I took the boards off, there they were, and you can see there the joint where the board was covered up and exposed to the bees. Just look at the Propolis coating. Oops. Propolis coating down here. Also, other plywood at the back, that's heavily propolised as well. Both of those are smooth surface. And how many times have you heard that bees will only propolise rough surface? They won't propolise smooth surface. There's your evidence. They do. Yes, they do. Module 6 question. Anybody going for Module 6 here? You're brave putting your hand up, because the rest haven't. Question. Approximately how long after queen loss are queen cells likely to be started in a colony? So take a queen away, how long before they start putting up queen cells? Does anybody know the answer? No? Well, the real answer?
Within 24 hours.
Within 24 hours. Anybody else? Straight away. Anybody else? You know I've got something up the sleeve, don't you? Yes, you do, don't you? Go on, go on, go on. Right. Okay. That's always something that has that I've noticed is a bit variable. Also, it's often assumed that all emergency cells are started together. That is at the same time. And the thinking is, once the queen's gone, the pheromones are no longer there, so the bees start queen cells. Is that what you understand? Because it's what I've always been told. Right. My observations show a great variability. So, you've guessed it, I did an experiment to cover both points. The results of which I put on was in Patterson's page, BBK News, October 2019. So you can go back online and you can have a look if you like. There's a bit of a write-up there as well. So this is what I did, and it might take a little bit of following. If you can't understand it, then just please shout out. So what I did, I took 4 colonies and I dequeened them on the same day, which was the 22nd of May 2019. They are the 4 colonies, and for purposes of explanation, I'll just call them A, B, C, and D. And this is the number of days where I inspected 24 hours, within shouting distance, 24 hours later. Okay, might be 23, might be 25, but you know when you're dealing with bees that you can't always get it that easy. There, you'll see the dates, and you'll also see in brackets the number of days after the colony was dequeened. So, these are the number of queen cells that were started, that I noticed being started, because I took the bees off the combs, right back to the bare comb, so I could actually count them and make sure I didn't miss any. So, let's look at colony A. If you look along the line there, very small number of queen cells. Right, now that one was a swarm that came to a bait hive on 12th of April, so about 6 weeks earlier. Now that may have been the reason for the low number of emergency cells built, but if you look at colony C, that is also low as well. B, C and D were, in my eyes, identical colonies. They were all full colonies with 2 or 3 supers. Don't forget, 22nd of May was a back end of the Orsi rape in my area. Now, all of them had overwintered previous year's queens. Previous year's queens. So I think they were fairly similar. So, what happened? 24 hours later, 3 colonies hadn't yet started queen cells, but 1 had put up 14. That's a variation to start with, isn't it? Okay. After 2 days, colony A still hadn't started queen cells. Still hadn't started. Colony A, after 5 days, they decided that they wanted another 2, so they'd gone from 3 to 5. Colony D, after 5 days, they decided they wanted another 1, so they went from 11 to 12. So after 5 days, they're still building queen cells, still adding. So that tends to suggest that they're starting over perhaps 3 or 4 days, not immediately as we're often told. Now we get into the more interesting bit. Colony 3, after 4 days, they put up 33 emergency cells, 3 of which were aborted in the previous day. They still, when I say aborted, you can tell because they start chewing them down, removing the contents, removing the royal jelly. And you can see that, and you very often see it in colonies. But although they had 33, they still decided they wanted another 3 after 4 days. Better still, a day later, they put another 4 up. They'd gone to 37. This is why you cannot humanise bees. That just does not make sense to me. Doesn't make sense. Okay? And the following day, after 6 days, so effectively that larva would have been a day or 2 days too old anyway. There was 1 queen cell aborted, and they built 1 more to replace it, up to 37. Why does a colony need 37 queen cells when at the most they probably need 2? But it doesn't. This is why, as I say, we can't humanise bees. Now, colony C, although it hadn't built very many, after 5 days, 1 queen cell had been aborted, so it had gone down from 2 to 1. In my experience, actually, that's a very, very low number anyway. But they built 4 on the following day, by the following day. Look at it. They're up to 5, though. They've gone from 2 to 5. And the final one is the colony D. After 5 or 6 days, 2 queen cells have been aborted, and they decided to leave it at that. So, try it yourself. That's a simple experiment that beekeepers can do. And the only reason I did it was, not the only reason, but one of the reasons I did it was because all of those queens I wanted to replace. So I turned it into a little experiment. And actually I was surprised at what I found. Try it yourself. So, what was the answer accepted in Module 6? Well, it was at a BBKO Spring Convention, and where I saw it was in one of the past papers. So there were 2 people on the stand who were heavily involved with the exam board. So I asked them. Sensible thing to do, isn't it? I didn't know the answer that they wanted, so I asked them. One of them just looked at me, turned around and walked away, and the other one said, I don't know, I didn't set the question. So, okay, you have a bit of a chuckle, that's fine. Anyway, right. Change of terminology. Under-supering and over-supering. Over the years, it's always been, if the hive needs another super, if you put it under the existing ones, that's called under-supering. If you put it over the existing ones, that's called over-supering. You go back through all the old books, and that's well, not all of them, but some of them, and that's what you find. It is not for wintering, like putting a super under brood chamber or one above. It's not also that I have heard under supering being not giving enough supers or over supering giving too many. But you know, people come into beekeeping and they don't understand the craft, and they just make it up themselves. Brood pattern.
Sorry, Roger, what do you do? Do you over-super or under-super?
Sorry?
What do you do? Over-super or under-super?
What do I do? Usually under super, unless there's a need for it. Incidentally, years ago, there used to be a man called Wilkins who was the county bee instructor for East Sussex. When we had been county bee instructors, and he always put the super underneath, and his reason was that the bees have got less distance to go before storing. So I've always thought to myself, well, hang on, you know, they've flown a mile and a half or whatever it is to get their forage and brought it back. What difference is 6 inches going to make? But you know, that's how people think, isn't it? And I don't think he was joking. Anyway, yeah, brood pattern. We're told we must have these great big slabs of perfect brood. But there's often a misinterpretation, and I've seen queens be killed simply because the beekeeper has not understood what's happening in the combs. Now, it can perhaps show a good or failing queen, but just by looking at it isn't enough. You need to sort of look underneath. You know, look much deeper into it. Inbreeding, quite frankly, I don't think is an issue for most of us. So I will dismiss this one. There are quite a lot of small, closed populations. And there's no inbreeding problem. Disease, yes, could be. Perhaps chalk brood, sack brood, those sort of things. Some bees are actually better at cleaning out, so it's not noticed quite so much. But you may find it on the floor or outside the hive. Now, detecting varroa is interesting because I've had this talk for like 20 years-ish, and I've always had that up there. Interestingly, it's only in the last few years it's been discovered that that's what bees actually do. So it really was just guesswork in my case. Now, very often cells could be full of something like pollen or nectar. Well, of course, if the queen's on that part of the comb, she can't lay in those cells anyway. So what you end up with is a knock-on effect throughout the summer. And very often some of these, well, not problems, but reasons are caused earlier in the season, and you just get a knock-on effect. But it's not a natural situation anyway, because in a natural situation in a tree cavity, if the colony's expanding, what happens is the queen lays underneath the existing brood, where there's nothing. Usually, there's no chalk brood, there's no pollen, there's no nectar or anything like that. It's generally open cells. So in a natural nest, you can get a very good brood pattern. But of course, with a beehive, you get two barriers. You get the floor, and then you get queen excluded, if indeed you use them. So of course, what happens is the queen's got to reuse what she's already used. Now, the bees, when they're expanding, are thinking, if indeed they think, that what they've got to do is an empty cell, I'll put some nectar and pollen in it. And that, of course, is why you get the situation that we do. So read the comb. Read the comb. Don't just, wow, isn't that fantastic? Look at it, see what's actually there and what the bees are trying to do. This is a virgin comb. I don't normally like putting, certainly not foundation in the middle of a brood nest, but if you put comb in, queen lays up like that, absolutely fine, no problem at all. But there's no barriers, no reason why she can't lay in any of those cells. So, of course, you get a reasonable result like that. But I'm just going to ask if you would requeen that colony. Before you came in here, I think a lot of people would requeen that colony because it is untidy. It's some people call it pepper pot, shop brood, or whatever. But let's just look a little bit closer and see what's happening. And this is what I say about reading the combs. So there's that bit there. You've got 2 cells there, 12 days apart. One's about to be sealed and the other's just emerging. So 12 days apart, which normally you'd expect to be much closer. You've got nectar in those cells, there's nectar in other cells as well, and there's pollen in those. Now, the queen, if she was on that comb, there's absolutely no way she can lay in those cells, so it's not really her fault if a few days later, or a week later, you get what people call pepper pot brood. So, even if you change the queen, you won't get a good pattern for the rest of the season. And then, of course, it's going to look as if the replacement queen isn't that great. As it happened, that was the next frame. And the reason it was the next frame is because it was a nuke that was overwintered. They started building up, and I then put them in a full colony with with combs in. So you've gone from the previous comb, or previous slide with a comb on that didn't look very good to something like that. So don't just blame the queen. So sorry, queen, it wasn't your fault. My mentor said you had to go. So how about that one then? Would you get rid of that? You might have done before you've seen the previous bits. But when I uncover it, look at that. You know, it's just circumstances of the comb. Obviously, here was where they came through the winter, and you know, that's where they packed pollen in and that sort of thing. The queen could expand, and of course, nothing wrong with that. So, observation, observation, observation. Don't just look at something and assume you've got the right answer, because the bees are probably beating you to it. Cleaning kit. We're all told to clean our kit, aren't we? What with? Washing soda, not caustic soda. And I'm sorry, folks, you're laughing. Sorry, I've seen in several newsletters and online and websites and that sort of thing use caustic soda. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Very dangerous. So challenge what you're told all the time. You can have some nasty accidents with caustic soda. We're told one of the reasons for importing queens is to increase genetic diversity and avoid inbreeding. Might sound logical, but in England and Wales there are 250,000 managed colonies, plus the free living ones that, let's say, another 50,000. Could be more, we don't know. There are much smaller numbers in closed populations. Certainly the Isle of Man, there's about 600, perhaps 800 colonies. Colonsay, there are about 50, and they've been closed populations for a long time, absolutely no problem at all. So it's highly unlikely. On top of that, with the commercial queens, what do? Dong, 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 dong. So you could end up with a whole batch of queens, all come from the same mother. So, you know, bit of an own goal, that one, isn't it? Free living colonies are a reservoir for disease. Well, I've removed several hundred. I say several hundred, might even be 400. I can tell you that they're much healthier than some of the managed colonies I see. Much healthier. I've never ever seen foul brood. Never seen foul brood in a free living colony. And if you see chalk brood, if I see chalk brood or sac brood, it's very, very light, like the odd cell or two. The reason for that, of course, is that they're subject to natural selection, and natural selection is absolutely ruthless. If there's something wrong, they don't mollycoddle it by giving it extra food or giving it some dope or whatever like that. If it don't like it and don't want it to be next part of the next generation, gone, whoosh, out of it. Absolutely ruthless. American foul brood was brought to the UK by American servicemen during World War II. I don't know where this came from, but I've been hearing this in the last 10 years or so. Have you heard it? Anyway, the story is that the infection came in discarded containers. That's what I've heard. Well, there was a report on a conference that was held in Rothamsted in 1934 called Brood Diseases of Bees. And the head of Rothamsted, Dennis Morland, stated, in Somerset, American foul brood's been endemic along the south side of the Quantock since 1919. Now, I may be wrong, but I'm fairly certain 1919 was before the Second World War. He reported it in other counties too. Annie Betts, who's a well-known past beekeeper, also stated in the same conference that Doolittle and Jones in the US in the early 80s, that's 1880, so 150 years ago, and our countryman Samuel Simmons, a well-known bee farmer, in 1887, also realised that there were two varieties of foul brood. Now, foul brood wasn't actually separated until about 1904, 1905, so even 20 years, 25 years earlier than that, it was known that there were two different foul broods, and it would have been in this country. Jumbo hives, they are not 14 by 12. I repeat, not 14 by 12. And the reason for that is that there is an American magazine, used to be called Gleanings in Bee Culture, now just called Bee Culture, published by one of the American manufacturers and suppliers, the Root Company. And in the May the 1st, 1899 edition, there was a letter from a man called A.N. Draper, who was a commercial beekeeper. I think he had about 700 colonies. He challenged the Root Company to make Langstroth boxes datent depth, 2 1/8 inches deeper. And there was, I think perhaps a little bit of a banter going on because he offered to pay for the experiment if it didn't go wrong. As it turned out, they ended up in Root's catalogue, and they were called Jumbo. And they were on Langstroth spacing rather than Dadant, which you probably know is different. So the reason I'm mentioning it is because if there are any newer beekeepers here who've bought 14 by 12s that somebody's called Jumbo, if you go looking buying frames or foundation, you'll get the wrong ones because you'll get, of course, Langstroth Jumbo. So that's the reason I'll mention it. Nosema sample size. This is brilliant, this is. 30 bees. Right, we all know it's 30 bees. Why this number? Anybody know the reason? You're all going to keep quiet now, aren't you? All going to keep quiet. Do you all know the reason? Sorry? The usual reason given, the 30 bee samples is based on a statistical probability of 90% chance of seeing a 10% infection rate or a 95% chance of seeing a 15%. Is that roughly what you were going to say, Alan? No, not now. You know there's something on its way. Is that what you've all heard? Of course it is. Yes, right. But that's not the real reason. In personal correspondence from a beekeeper who actually is at this convention, who had a long connection with Rothamsted, where Dr. Leslie Bailey worked on bee diseases, wrote to me, The 30B sample was standardised at Rothamsted many years ago because the centrifuge tubes that they were using for various purposes and had lying about the lab just happened to contain 30 bees. Much later, Dr. Bailey consulted statisticians and they concluded that to improve the chances of detecting infections, the sample size would have to be increased 10 or 100-fold. This wasn't practical. A matchbox also happens to helpfully contain 30 bees. Okay? You agree with me, do you? Yep, okay. Right. Eating bananas before handling bees. What does it do? What does it do? Yeah, it makes them angry, doesn't it? Really angry, and they go mad and all the rest of it. Have you ever tried it? Yes. Good. Give it a go. Give it a go, folks. I have. Absolutely no problem. No problem at all. Never, ever had it. And I've done it a dozen or more times. So I did an experiment. I took a full colony, I peeled a banana, put it on top of the brood box, also with the skin, took a photograph 15 minutes later. Okay? Right. A swarm contains a queen and a large percentage of foraging bees in a colony. I know that, and the reason I know it is because I took it off the internet. Okay? I know it. You look at a swarm. Just look at it. You'll find drones, you'll find bees of all ages, you'll find bees with pollen on their legs, all sorts of things like that. Have a look at the colony the second day, and you wouldn't know they swarmed. So all the flying bees hadn't gone, had they? Mr. Morland, the one that previously mentioned, and Colin Butler, who I'm sure most of you have heard of, in 1940 did an experiment, and they found that up to 70% of bees in a swarm are less than 10 days old. Now, if they're less than 10 days old, they haven't flown, have they? Okay? Sorry, folks, that's why you need to challenge what you're told. Any questions? No? Thanks very much.
I don't think we're letting you away as fast as that.
Did I go fast enough for you?
Yes, I think you went fast enough for all of us. Thank you very much, Roger. Are there any questions? Was a gentleman there was trying to accost you in the middle of
the sample bees in the container being 30 bees.
Yeah.
I already knew the answer. We were privileged to have met a gentleman called Peter Tompkinson.
Oh, Peter,
you
yeah.
Probably knew, worked at Rothamsted. So he put that myth aside many, many moons ago for us. So that was an easy question for us to answer. So, but yes, you are right. He taught us, probably because he worked at Rothamsted, challenge everything. Always challenge it. Just keep going back and checking it. And that's one thing I've always believed in beekeeping.
Yeah. Good stuff. Have you bought the book? Oh, I think you ought.
I'm like all good beekeepers. I'm broke.
Actually, buy two because they're all different.
His missus used to have a full set of encyclopedias, but she had to throw them away because he knew everything.
There's another question in the middle there.
Morning, Roger. I noticed on some of your slides there that some of the queen cells were right next to drone. Now, I was told by a very experienced beekeeper not to keep those queen cells because they could have a male egg, unfertilised egg in there. What's your opinion on that?
This is a so-called king bee. And the thinking is that if the queen cell is close to drone, the queen could lay drone eggs. Personally, I have never, ever seen it. Never seen it. The only time I've seen drones in what look like queen cells is if you get a drone laying queen. And for some reason, they build what appear to be queen cells, but obviously with a drone inside. Now, it doesn't make sense to me why they seal them because as I understand it, the sealing of queen cells is done on a pheromonal basis, presumably on a fertile larva. So what's happening with an infertile larva, I don't know. It's way, way, way beyond me. But all these things are why I challenge things. I have never ever seen that. I think if you've got a drone laying queen, then fine.
I think it's also not just challenging, it's asking the whys. When I started beekeeping, I was told about flaming out hives to clean them out. And then I was told that if we had nasty bees, we could kill them by pouring petrol in the hive. So my expectation was I would pour petrol in the hive, followed by a match, because that would clean the hive at the same time. It wasn't at all. If I'd have asked why or how, I would have got the right answer. I hope I got the right answer. But yes, you have to ask, why do I do that?
And can we be very clear that dropping a match in after petrol is not a good or recommended technique? Yeah, don't try that.
Why not?
There's a
lady in the middle. Yeah, okay.
It was back to the point about the king bee. So when we were learning, like really learning, it was a few years ago, and we were doing a beginner's beekeeping course, and a drone crawled out of a sealed queen cell. And it was one of the reasons why we have personally felt that leaving 2 queen cells might sometimes be a good option, because how would you know if someone had put a drone inside a queen cell? So there was nothing else wrong with that hive. It had a laying queen, but they just kept the 1 queen cell, and the drone crawled out later than they were expecting the queen.
Apart from the instance that I've mentioned, I don't think I've ever seen a drone in a queen cell. I don't think I have.
Yeah, so this definitely wasn't a drone laying hive. It had all the normal group pattern apart from, and the people that were teaching us were absolutely expecting a queen to come out of that cell and were confused why it had taken such a long time.
Yeah. The problem is if that was the second one though, and the first one was a virgin queen, they could swarm with that, and they still leave the poor one anyway. Now, going back to what I was saying, if leave 2 queen cells, if you've got a small colony, there's no problem because they're unlikely to swarm. So if you've got a nuke or something like that, provided it's not absolutely bursting with bees and it's filling the box up, you should be okay.
But even then, personally, I would be careful.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Thank you very much.
Okay.